Baby goodness. Welcome to the Knife Freak Show. My name is Jonathan McNees. This is my co-host, Mr. Chase Boatright.
How you doing?
Doing good this morning. How are you?
I'm great. I am here.
Good. That's probably going to be about the best we can ask for the next little over a month leading up to Blade Show here.
Yeah, it's getting back into that grind where I'm just kind of existing and working. So
yeah, that kind of feels like that's pretty much 365 days out of the year or so for me.
Yeah.
it's occasional breaks here and there, but most of it is just a blur. I cannot believe. That's what I was thinking earlier. I was like, Blade Show's coming up, which is coming up really fast, which is also like halfway through the year, basically. Pretty close. It's like, my God, I cannot believe that half the year has already evaporated. So,
yeah, I had to tear up a check the other day because I wrote 2023 on it. I'm a couple of years behind. I don't even,
haven't gotten anywhere near as much done first half of the year as I wanted to, which is pretty much always the case. I can never do as much as I want to do. So
par for the course.
Yeah,
for sure.
But anyway, so aside from anything kind of special or out of the ordinary going on with your Blade Show prep or anything else?
No. I mean, I'm working on stuff. I let the cat out of the bag as far as our little collab the other day on Instagram. So I'm in the process of building one of the last few original Dixons that you started. You ground the blade and you started it, and I'm just kind of going through and doing all the stuff that you hadn't done yet. So
I forgot that blade was already ground when you got it. I thought it was just totally raw parts.
Yeah, it was mostly ground. I did have to I thought I was going to be able to hand rub all the scratches out, and
it wasn't like finished ground.
Yeah, you didn't quite get to that point, so I did have to regrind it, and I ended up doing a swedge on it. I don't know if you saw that.
I saw that. Yeah, I'm anxious to see the total finished product with a finish on it and all, and see how I like that, because I've debated doing a swedge on those. I don't know if it's. I'll be honest. I don't think I'm going to like a swedge on them. I may like it on this one just because it's different, but at the same time, I don't know if it's just because that's different than my original vision for it. So I don't know if it's just me being stuck in that, or if I really am going to end up not liking it on the design. So we'll see.
Yeah, I went through and looked at a bunch of the old ones you did, and I never saw a swedge on one. And I wasn't going to do it if I didn't have to regrind it. But once I had to regrind it, I was like, I'll put a little bit of my flair on there, and
make it a little different anyway. So that's cool.
So
I'm anxious to see how it looks. Yep, for sure. Cool. Well, we had our speaking of the Dixons, our first big drop of the Dixons was this week, which was phenomenal. Like, a big shout out to all you guys that supported us on that and hopped on there and either bought one or tried to buy one or whatever. Like, I guess that was probably, I think that was the most knives we've ever dropped at one time on the site. I wouldn't swear to it 100%, but I believe it was. And I know it was the fastest that many knives have gone. It was just ridiculous. Like I was telling you, I honestly did not think the site would even process orders that fast. Like, it was insane, which is a good thing. But
that's a great thing.
Yeah. So we're super appreciative of that, super grateful. But hang on, guys, those of you that couldn't get any, or those of you that got one and it just kind of wet your whistle and you're going to want another one in a different configuration or something, they're coming. So Blade Show will be the next time those are available. So plan on.
I believe there was a comment or a question somewhere that I saw that was asking about different finish configurations and different stuff besides just plain Jane, and I figured that would be the case. Is
right,
get the first batch out there, and
I kind of wanted the first batch to all just be the same. For one thing, we were trying to just get as many done as we possibly could for the drop, and so obviously doing the basic configurations the fastest way to make them. So that was part of the thinking on that. But we've already got handles anodized and stuff, just waiting on blades that I'll be showing pretty soon leading up to Blade Show. So Blade Show I don't plan on having any of the milling patterns yet. It's going to be a little bit, because again, we're introducing a new model. It's hopefully going to stay in relatively high demand. So I want to just kind of roll with the basic stuff for a little while, and then we'll start to introduce some of the milling patterns and stuff. So
Gotcha. I was about to ask about that if you had any plans for milling patterns on that one, since it's a different sort of, it's contoured, so I didn't know how that would entirely work.
I didn't know for sure either at first, and I haven't actually run one, but I've talked to other people, and I've already got a little hint from, shout out to my buddy Doug, Attention to Detail Mercantile. He gave me the little unlock that I needed on how to transfer my patterns onto a contoured surface like that. So I haven't actually run one yet, but I've basically got it programmed up and ready to go to do a frag on one. It's once he gave me that little fusion, not really a trick exactly, but told me which button to hit on fusion. It made a lot of difference. So,
it's all about finding the right button. Yeah.
Yep. Just finding the right. It was something that I'd never even paid any attention to. You know what I mean? I don't know that I didn't know that the feature was there or whatever. It's just a simple little thing that lets you transfer it to the right surface. So,
and I don't know if you want to go into this or not, but does it have something to do with going to the same Z depth across like a plane versus transferring a differentiated Z depth across a contoured?
Right. So the problem with the tool path that we use to do all the other patterns is just a trace tool path, which means basically you think about a flat surface. If you took and drew if there's a line on a piece of paper and you take a pencil and you trace that line, it traces it at one height. So it's just flat across the paper, right? If you take, say, a round, say a bottle, and you draw a circle around the circumference of a bottle and you lay it down on its side, and then you take your pencil, well, then now it becomes a 3D surface that your pencil has to, wrap around the bottle to trace the line. And so basically it's basically just a project to surface is literally the thing. It basically takes your sketch that's a 2D sketch on one plane, like a piece of paper, and it's like you took that piece of paper and then you laid it on something, like say on that Coke bottle, and then you wrapped it around it. That's basically what that feature does. It takes your sketch and it projects it to whatever the surface is, whether it's round or, in our case, it's rounded, not fully round. It takes and projects that sketch onto that surface and wraps it around it to fit the contours of it. So then when the machine goes down and traces it with the tool, it's actually tracing it in 3D and not just, one plane.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds, all of that made a lot of sense to me from my mapping background. You have to project the Earth's surface, when you're doing a map, you have to, since it's not, the Earth is not actually flat, in case any of y'all are wondering, but, don't want to get into that.
Yeah. So,
but,
So yes, mill pattern will be coming there. I've already, it's really just that I don't want to, a brand new design. I don't want to throw every iteration of it out there, immediately. Like I want to let it have some time to get out there and kind of simmer a little bit and let people then see how part of that too is for feedback so that I can get a good idea of what the basic knife, what people think about it. And if there's changes I need to make, stuff like that, then, and that way, once we get it for sure, if I'm happy with the feedback and things don't start to eat at me over time of something that I don't like that I want to change, then kind of get that figured out and then start to do all the different configurations. So,
gotcha.
So
makes sense.
Super excited about that. That'll lead up to Blade Show. After our plan for them basically is to make as many as we can between now and Blade Show. Take a good supply to the Blade Show. We'll have Mac 2s, 3.5s as well, and hopefully some fixed blades. But and then after Blade Show, we'll probably do at least one more drop on our site, and then we're going to start shipping to dealers some too. We'll probably do a combination of shipping to dealers and dropping some on our site along too. To keep doing like our Friday drops, and then be shipping to dealers. So that's kind of the plan.
Cool.
So,
all right. So
you had go ahead.
Yeah.
We were both about to say the same thing.
Yeah. Got a freak of the week again this week. Not necessarily something, I want to do every week or, anything like that. But when somebody's work catches my eye, I definitely want to give them a shout out. And this week, wanted to shout out NKT Knives. That's at NKT_knives on Instagram. Maker's name is Jonathan Neely. And He's just he's been really impressing me as far as his folders and his workflow and processes and stuff like that. He seems to do things very efficiently, and that's something I strive to do. So if y'all notice a pattern in these things, it's usually something that I'm striving to get better at. And when I see other people doing good things in that category, it really impresses me. And I like his designs. I like his fit and finish seems to be good. I hadn't actually held one in hand, but he seems to have a very, I don't know, precision minded part of his game, I guess, if that makes any sense. I don't know. He seems to come from a machinist background, but I believe you've talked to him in person, and I haven't. So
Yeah, I have actually checked one out in person. I met him up at Whitty's open house last year for USA Made Blade, and I got to talk to him and check one out. Yeah, you're right. Very very good, clean work. He's doing a great job. Super nice guy. I think he's got some on the right track, doing some really good things and building his brand up. So really anxious to see where he goes. And yeah, I've noticed the same thing about his workflow that he seems to kind of do. So it reminds me of what I used to do as far as working in batches. He may even be working in bigger size batches than I did, but I would usually take five, depending. Sometimes I'd have a little more than that going on, but five kind of seemed to be the sweet spot for a week. I would try to get five blade or five knives pushed through folders. In a week and basically do all the steps to all five knives. So when you're drilling holes in the handles, drill all the holes in the handles at the same time, for on all five, and then move on to the whatever,
yeah,
When you start grinding blades, grind all five blades. When you contouring handles, contour all five sets of handles, like that kind of stuff. So, and that
yeah,
from what he shows, that seems to kind of be the way he's doing things, which seems to be pretty efficient for him.
yeah, and that's definitely something I aspire to. And I had mentioned before to you that I'm not necessarily good at that, and kind of analyzing my workflow since then, I am good at the doing it all at once part. It's the moving on to the next step and taking them all to the next step that I have trouble with. That's when I'm like, okay, I got all that done, so I feel good about that. Now this is starting to languish, so I go over here and try to bring it up to speed. And I'm sort of in this constant push and pull, trying to get everything done all at once. And so that's where I think I need more focus. And okay, let's we
So when you
drilled all the
say,
holes. Now let's go
yeah,
to
so
the
let
next
me ask
step
you
with
this:
these.
when you say this over here is now getting behind, what is this over here? Is it a part of that? Say five knives. Let's just call
No,
it five knives. Okay,
maybe. I
there's
mean,
probably some
sometimes.
problem.
Sometimes
Yeah,
it is. Sometimes it's like, oh, okay, now I need to go, cut out all now I need all these need clips or something. Like I feel like I'm behind on the clips or something, or
yeah,
oh, these I need to do something with these backspacers or something like that. But most of the time it's because I work in differing batches of I've got folders, I've got fixed blades, I've got some for customers, some for dealers, and so I'll grind a couple folders, then I'll come over here and grind a fixed blade or do the handles on a fixed blade or glue it up over here or something like that. And, you know,
yeah.
some of that is, I guess, to keep my interest, and some of it, like, I like to glue up handles at the end of the day. That way they're ready by the
Right.
next morning. So instead of, doing whatever I was doing for the folders for the in till the end of the day, I get that fixed blade ready, glue up the handles, and then it's ready the next day whenever I move on. And also trying to plan out workflow processes for like when stuff's in heat treat. I never like to have downtime, so I'm always kind of chasing my tail a little bit.
Yeah. So in my mind, and I don't know that I definitely wasn't always perfect at it, but in my mind, you can get basically X amount of work done in a day,
Mm.
X times, if, if you like, you're probably doing 7 days a week. So you basically can get, a certain amount of work done in a week.
Yeah.
So in my mind, taking a like narrowing your focus, and instead of saying, okay, I got fixed blades going over here for dealers, I got this for this for this, just saying, okay, figuring out a reasonable project that you can finish in a week, which, like I said,
Mm-hmm.
for me was typically I would five fold. If I could finish five folders in a week, I felt pretty, that kind of kept me on track. So basically have it mapped out, start to finish, all the processes, what order of operations you need to go to include, like while they're heat treating, well, that's when you can be contouring your handles or whatever, because at that point you probably got them ready to do that or whatever kind of stuff you're doing on your handles, something so that you're not needing the blade because it's in blades because they're in heat treat or whatever. But like just narrowing your focus down to like, these are the order of operations. This is the order I'm going to do it in every night. Figure out what the best order of operations is to build a folder, basically. And I know sometimes some monkey wrench gets thrown in there and something happens and you got to redo something or something, you don't get a specific material in time or whatever. But like ideally, perfect, best order of operations, the most efficient way to do everything. That's what you do every week, and then you just move from one project to the next. Same thing with fixed blades. So like this week, I'm making these 5 folders, and then I work through my list till they're done, and then I start the next. Because in reality, you're only getting a certain amount of work done every week anyway. You're not actually, you're not. It's kind of like if you were reading 5 books at the same time. Like you're not reading anymore. If you allot the same amount of time to reading in a week, you're still reading the same amount of pages, whether it's in 1 book or whether it's in 5 books.
Yeah.
So, you see what I'm saying? So you're not
I agree.
more done that way. It's just, I know it can be hard to do, but
I agree. I think it's,
because you're a
I
big
think
list
it's
guy. Like,
yeah, I am organized in every sense of the word, except for when I am working. And to an extent, I think my fixed blade process is, I know what comes next at all times.
Right.
My folder list, I'm still monkeying around with that process.
Yeah.
So I think that's where part of it comes in. I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready to do that yet, or I don't know if I'm, I'm sort of non-committal. And so instead of doing something that would ruin the whole process, I'll just go do something else and, think on it for a bit. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's somewhere, like, again, I mean, that's something you just got to work through in your own time. But like, yeah, that seems like committing to but honestly, I also think that committing to a set, semi-rigid order of operations for how you do everything and doing it the same way every time will eliminate some of that lack of confidence that's causing you to like, okay, I don't really know what I need to do next or whatever. If you've nailed it down, like, okay, on paper, this makes sense to do this, and this, then and do them in those steps, then I mean, it's just like baking a cake. You do the same. Like, again, aside from having to mess something up and redo something or whatever, like it's basically,
which I do a lot.
Yeah, well, still, then to me, it might, so say you're making clips, you mess up a clip, well, then you get that next clip back up to where then you get the replacement clip until it's finished up to speed with the rest of them, and then you continue on to the next item on the list or whatever. So anyway, this is probably getting a little deeper than most of the people out here want to hear, but this is the kind of stuff that goes along with not just knife making, but working for yourself, guys. Like when not having somebody to tell you, hey, you need to do this today, this is your job today or whatever, do this, and this. Like, that's one of the challenges of working for yourself. It's
very much so. Yeah, I'm real good at somebody says, hey, you need to do this. I can do that. I know what I'm supposed to do. Like, but whenever I'm left to my own devices, I get a little scatterbrained at times, I guess. But
it can be easy to do, especially if you're excited about what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like excitement kind of leads to, I want to hurry up. I want to see what this fixed blade is going to look like when the blade's ground or whatever. Like, so you get, some of that just comes from the passion of creating things. And that it is where, honestly, that's probably one of the most challenging things is being like the creative, artistic type, but then having to rein yourself in and put yourself on these rails of, okay, I'm creating stuff, but I've got to do it in a neat, orderly fashion and stay on track and be disciplined about it, because if not, what you're describing happens. You end up kind of all over the place. And so, that's walking that line between being, and that it's kind of what we've talked about before, where a lot of times people that are artistic minded, creative minded aren't great business minded. And that's kind of that really kind of is the basis of that. Like the business, the artistic side of you wants to do whatever is appealing to you at the moment, where the business side of you says, hey, we've got to get these 5 knives done this week, so we can buy food. Or whatever, you know what I mean? Or more supplies or whatever it may be, you know what I mean? So like, Yeah, I think that's kind of the very root of the business minded / versus artistic side right
Mm-hmm.
there. That's where most people, I think, kind of diverge and have a hard time staying on tracks.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm just I'll have those boom and busts. I'll have real good efficient times and then real bad
Yeah,
non-efficient times,
yeah,
as it were.
yeah. You'll find you groove, and that still happens, dude. I mean, we're constantly ours usually comes back from more of like I run so fast on everything. Like I'm so fast to too fast sometimes to make decisions and decide to go a certain way or whatever, and then we so it doesn't work out. I'm already 3 steps into it, and then we to figure out that step one ain't going to work the way we thought it was going to work, and so
Yeah.
we got to back up, and it causes problems. So, like I'll give you a really good example. So we started off, we pulled the blade grinding in house. We're doing the blade grinding, right? We do that with the blades hardened. Well, on the first batch of blades that we were working on developing that we had just a very slight bit of warpage on them when they came back from heat treat. So we were having to either, take time to straighten them and deal with all that, and decided, man, it would be way, way better if these things could be perfectly flat and stuff when we put them on here to grind them and stuff, because if they're warped and stuff when you grind them, it's going to show up because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when it's being held down on a flat, this is not freehand grinding. This is like on a machine. If that
Yeah.
if that part's not being held down flat, on a flat surface as it's being ground, then it's going to grind the side that's warped up or whatever that's pushing up more is going to get ground
Mm-hmm.
deeper than the other side. So
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, okay, well then maybe, and talked to some people and like, okay, hard milling is not really all that difficult. This is what I was told. And so I'm like, okay, then yeah, that would be the solution. Then we'll take all the blades that we're going to grind. We'll just heat treat the blanks, and then we'll put them on here, or we'll put them back we'll put them on the surface grinder that grind them down after they've already been heat treated. They'll be perfectly flat. Then we can put them on the mill, do the hard milling on them. It'll help us with our stop pin locations, because then we don't have to worry about where stuff. I've talked before about how you're kind of like guessing, educated guess, like when you put the tip, especially in the closed position, because it affects the detent,
Mm-hmm.
where you have the stop pin location milled to, so where the blade rests on the stop pin, you have to typically leave the tip a little lower than you would like to, or than it's eventually going to be, because you have to allow for it to grow during heat treat, and it's going to raise up. And that's always, no two blades ever grow exactly the same, and it's
Yep.
just a total hit or miss. I mean, and we're talking about minute amounts of movement, but the minute amount of movement affects the detent significantly. So
Yes.
so it's like, okay, that'd be a solution for that too, because we'll be milling them after they're already hard, so we can mill them to the exact location we want them every time, and not be having to worry about the guessing of what heat treat's going to do to it and all that.
Yeah.
So you want to guess where this has led to? Hard milling ain't quite so easy.
Mm.
Which I was nervous about the whole time. And I'm still working on it. And so what I did was, okay, we've got to keep this train moving. So let's send all the blade blanks that we've got off the heat treat, which wasn't a ton, but a couple hundred, or a little more, 200 to 300, I think. Let's send all these
Mm.
blades blanks off the heat treat, and then we'll do that whole process with the hard milling. And so get the blades back, start working on doing that, and guess what? Hard milling ain't working so great. And
Mm.
so now we don't have any blades to grind. So I'm still working on it. I think we're going to be able to, I'm getting close, I think, to having the hard milling where it's doable. I don't think it's going to be viable probably for full on production. Like, I think I'll probably end up being able to salvage those blades and use them by hard milling, but it's just going to go a lot slower than I would want for it to go while, doing the machining part of it on them. So then, I
Yeah.
mean, I literally already had another batch of blanks that I'd had the water jet cut, send straight to Peter's heat treat. I literally had to hit Peter's heat treat up the next day after they got them and be like, hey, whoa, stop. Please don't heat treat those yet. Just send them back to me. My bad.
Yeah.
Never mind. Let me mill them and I'll send them right back to you. So, like, I mean, because I was like, because if you don't, you can't wait on making these
No.
decisions and just
Yeah,
test
you'll be
stuff out.
behind.
We also don't have something to do. Like we have to
Yeah.
have parts to work on. So it's like, I make a decision and we hit the gas, but then, something happens and you run up on the curb, and then it's like, all right, better pump the brakes, and let's figure something else out. And yeah, it's it's frustrating, but it's that's not an intentional, that's not necessarily a lack of focus. It's just I should have hedged my bets is what I should have done. I should have still sent some, should have still done some, been milling some before they were hardened and getting them moving, just dealing with straightening them or whatever and moving them through the process at the same time, so that, and then whichever one worked out the best, just continue with that. In hindsight, that's what I should have done. I should have just, I should have hedged my bets and done some of both until we figured out for sure which one was going to be the better method. But, good old hindsight.
Are you getting variance because of like the end mills basically wearing? Is that what's,
variance
creating like on the closed position? Like, is that what you're encountering? Is like
tool
wear,
we
or
can compensate for that? No, we can compensate.
That's what I was thinking.
Tool wear. No, it's not with the hardened ones that we're having that problem. It's with when you mill them and then you send them off to heat treat, the material actually grows. So it doesn't always grow the exact same amount. So we have to basically aim low. We have to kind of use Kentucky windage. We know because we learned this the hard way, because I got them dialed in to where they were coming off the mill with the stop pin, like with that location, the tip was exactly where I wanted it every time. And so, all right, great, we're good. We get them back from heat treat. Well, then we had to manually take and grind the stop pin location on every single one because the tips were too high on all of them. And so
I was there for some of that, but
right.
I was saying, like, you said there was some issues as far as the hard milling, so I didn't know if
that's breaking freaking end mills. That's being able to even mill it. Yeah, no, that's not.
That's tool wearing away.
Yeah, it's wear all right. It don't have time to wear it. It snaps it. So when the only the place that's giving me a problem is inside the opening hole, the little smiley hole for the thumb hole. It's especially in those tight corners. That was
getting into where it's hitting on.
From a machining standpoint, when that little and that an eighth, it has to be an 1/8 inch little small end mill to go in there and do it. And I think I've got figured out a different strategy to do it. I haven't. I broke all my good end mills trying to do it the other way, which made me stop and rethink about it. And I think I've got a way figured out to do it, but it's still not going to be ideal. It's probably not going to be cost efficient in the long run. It's not going to be fast enough, and it's probably going to still wear out tools too fast. But so we're probably going to still stick with the, doing it the other way, doing them, heat treating them before. After we do all the milling and stuff on them, and then heat treat them and then grind them. Yeah. And then we'll just have to deal with the straightening and stuff. But we're still kind of going to try to, we got a little bit of process figured out for that. We're leaving them a little, we're just basically taking them down to the roughing, which is within a couple of thou. I think it's actually within about 4 or 5 thou total thickness. So we're surface grinding them down, leaving them just a little bit oversized, and that doesn't matter on the milling that we're doing on them before we send them off, because you're just doing like the edges and stuff, mostly putting holes in it and doing the profile and that kind of stuff. But then we send it off to heat treat, then it's going to come back, and then we'll put it back on there and remove those last 4 or 5 thou to get our really good surface finish on it, and should help. Unless it's bad warped, that should probably get rid of most any little bit of warping that's in there. If it's warped more than that, we'll just have to straighten it manually. And then we'll put it on the mill to grind it. And I think that's probably going to end up being our sweet spot, which still puts me back to having to do a little bit of calculated guesswork on the stop pin locations. But that's, been doing that the whole time. So it is what it is.
Seems like that'll be a good way to do it, but we'll see.
Yep. All right. We'll see. Now, another week, and I may be telling you a completely different story. So
So we had a viewer or listener suggested topic for today.
All right.
Wanted to hear about knife maintenance. It was WL Ray, if I remember correctly. My brain is not working today, apparently. Anyway, so we wanted to kind of go into a little bit of knife maintenance, as far as, I guess, what we do and, what we recommend and stuff like that. And you want to take one off the tee, or you want me to go?
Sure. Honestly, to me, it's not super complicated. And Chase, I guarantee he's already laughing. My theory on knife maintenance is run the crap out of it until it's, that's me personally. I'm not telling you should do that. You should maintain your knife, but I'm hard on them. I don't play around, which is partially intentional, because I don't, I don't feel like I'm getting a true test of what our stuff can do. And when I say that, I'm talking about I'm kind of bad about it with all my knives, but especially the ones that we make that I carry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Try to
I'm not.
worst case scenario,
Yeah,
like.
yeah. I mean, like, I don't want to know that best case scenario. If somebody takes this apart and cleans it every week and keeps it all perfectly lubed and cleaned out and all that, like, I want to know if somebody never messes with it and they just run the crap out of it, like, what's it going to do? Is it going to, how's it going to hold up? So,
And to be fair,
yeah.
I'm like that with the knives I make too.
Yeah.
I'm just better for the knives that other people make. So,
yeah. So in my opinion, one of the best things you can do is if you don't have a compressor with like an air gun, then a can of compressed air. So for, like, say, weekly or something like that, it all depends too, guys. Like, if you're carrying the same knife day in and day out, and which a lot of us do not. I know it's, some of us do, some of us don't, but depends on your conditions that you're working in. It depends on the area you live in, humidity, salt, all that kind of stuff. So it just kind of depends. But I'd say a good starting point would be some kind of compressed air, maybe once a week, something like that. Just kind of blowing out around the bearings and the action of the knife and stuff, and just cleaning all the lint and junk out of it. If you're using the knife very much, if you use it a good bit that day, maybe touch the edge up on a ceramic rod or a leather strop that night will help keep you from having to resharpen it as much. It was just, honestly, more people should worry about that than they should about keeping a little bit of lint out of it, because a little bit of lint in there is, I know we've got some, like, Sleeping Beauties out there, or no, not the Sleeping Beauty, the Princess and the Pea, where, like, they think they can feel it gets one little tiny, like, micro hair in there, and they can feel it in the action, kind of like the princess can feel the pea under the 12 mattresses or whatever it was. Like,
I think that's more of a sound thing, if I'm being honest, than actual feel, but
it can be. But anyway, so, like, but some people are just really, really picky and OCD about that, which is fine. It's not hurting anything technically if to keep it super clean, but you keeping the edge as maintained as well as you can, so that you don't have to sharpen it as much, literally lengthens the life of your knife. Because every time you're actually sharpening and not just striping, every time you're sharpening a knife, you are removing metal from the edge and you are taking off the life of the knife. So that's probably the most important thing that you can do for maintaining a knife, is keeping the edge stropped regularly and properly, because that actually, none of the other stuff we're talking about is going to actually literally remove material from your knife, but sharpening does. So, I guess technically rust could if it pitted deep enough or something like that. But, like, realistically, that's the only thing that, maintenance wise, that if you don't do it, you're literally losing life of the knife because you're removing metal every time you have to resharpen it. So,
continual edge maintenance versus, like, completely reprofiling an edge down, because and I've done it too, especially steel suppliers love to put big staples in the boxes of steel and stuff, and so you go to open your box of steel and ka-tink, ka-tink, ka-tink. So I've been there, I've done that, but sometimes you have to resharpen, but trying to maintain the edge with a quick little strop, or few passes on a ceramic rod or something, is much better than having to remove a whole bunch of material. And again, I kind of think of it like the tires of the knife. Like, that's your wear, that will, it will go bald. It will, wear down eventually. And so, but, trying to lengthen that is important.
Yep, it for sure is, and it just makes it. It takes a few seconds on a ceramic rod or a leather strop or something to kind of touch the edge back up. If you do it again, it depends on how much you're using the knife. If you open 3 packages with it during the week, then once a week is for sure plenty good enough. If you're opening multiple packages, or you're, like, cutting up a bunch of cardboard to recycle or whatever, something like that, and, like, that kind of stuff, got cardboard, paper and stuff, is actually pretty abrasive and rough on edges and stuff. So it just kind of depends on what kind of stuff you're doing with it. But, like, if you're wearing your edge down, then just the more you're using it, the more frequently you need to strop it or touch it up. So without actually removing metal from it. So that would honestly be my number one tip on maintenance. After that, like I said, just kind of blowing it out, cleaning it out once a month, putting either keeping some oil, just having some, even just WD-40. It honestly doesn't matter. I mean, I'm sure some oils technically, if you get down the nitty gritty, are better than others, but any kind of oil, like just wiped on the knife, especially if you're in, a real humid environment, or if you're one of those unlucky people, like literally people's body chemistry is different. Some people's oils and stuff on their fingers are just like super corrosive to metals and stuff. It's just, I mean, you take one person that they can handle a blade, same thing with guns and stuff. Like you can, grab it by the metal bits, and one person can do it all day long and it doesn't cause a problem. And the next person, they touch it one time and they've got a big giant fingerprint rust spot on there. Like it's just the way we're made. So I've really become a fan of blade wax. So for the blades themselves, you still can put oil on there. There you go. So we have actually too. So you notice I didn't mention oiling the action, and that's because you can oil the action, but you need to be very careful about how and how much and all that. Most people put way, especially if you're using these like new fancy oils like nano oil or knife pivot lube, all those oils are made to spread and get into every crack and crevice that they can find. And there are places that you do not want oil on your knife that are really close to places that you do want oil on your knife. So like oil around the bearings, oil on the detent track, good. Oil on the lock face, no bueno. You're asking
no
for lock
bueno
stick.
at all.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I've had multiple times where somebody would send in a knife to us, and for whatever reason, sometimes like say lock stick, and we get it in and it's just covered in oil. And it's like, and like we've had them, we send them out, with proper amounts of oil and lubrication on them. And then we get them back, as soon as they get it, we're like, hey, this lock sticking. And I'm like, well, it wasn't 2 days ago when we shipped it out. And then like, did you oil it? Yeah, I put a little bit of oil on it. And then they send it back and it's like slathered, like it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's coming out of the front of the scales. It's, I mean, and, when I worked for you, like when we got those in, first thing I would do is just take it apart, clean everything out, not do anything else, and just put it back together dry. And most of the time that would fix the lock stick.
Right.
So,
yep. So it's, we've actually, what I was starting to mention was that we've actually, mainly for that reason, we've actually started using our blade wax as for lube around the pivot, basically all the lube. So like we used to put a drop of oil, around the bearing on each side of the bearings or whatever. Now the guys just have a can of the wax sitting there and a Q-tip, and they just spread some wax around on each side under where the bearings go and like on the detent track. And I honestly think that it's slicker than the oil is. If you put them two together side by side and feel of them, I honestly think it's a little slicker feel than the oil. And I haven't done like scientific testing to prove it, but I feel like it probably stays longer than the oil does too.
I used to kind of do a method of that where I got some like grease, basically some like, that really sticky like Teflon grease. And I would put a little bit of that inside there. And that kind of creates a little bit of also a barrier for, dust and grit and stuff. It'll get caught in the grease that's kind of on the outside versus getting into the actual bearing. And, so I've done stuff like that before too.
Yeah.
Not wax yet.
I feel like and you kind of touched on something too. Yeah, too much lube of any kind or whatever in there just becomes a magnet for all the dust and particles and stuff anyway, and they all end up staying, in your action instead of just moving on through. So
it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. You put too much oil in there and then it gets all gunky and then you have to clean it, and then you put too much oil and then I've done all these things, guys, so I'm not hating. I've done all of these things, so I know. I used to take them apart and clean them like, once or twice a week just because I was, bored and wanted to do something. So, I've definitely been there, but that's not necessarily maintenance. That's just tinkering at that point. So, there's that, and there's nothing wrong with it. Just saying, know what you're doing and,
call it what
be
it is.
reasonable with yourself,
Right. Yeah, that's right. And so, I really big fan of the wax for basically for the lube now. Like could change my mind down the road, but we've been doing that for a good little bit now. And I really like and it does seem to help with, because before, like I said, even if you're trying to put a tiny drop of something like nano oil or whatever, like we take it over there and lay it on the inspection table or something, and then by the time it gets inspected, it might have developed lock stick because that oil ran and got on the lock face. And we take it, clean it good with acetone, it goes away. But like that just kind of avoids that. And when we put a knife together, we don't know how long it's going to be, before it's in a customer's hands or whatever. And we don't need it, sitting, it's maybe shipped, stay in our shop for a minute, go to a dealer, and then get to a customer. Like it could be days or weeks or whatever. Like we don't want to give a chance for oil to be creeping into places it shouldn't be. And then their first impression when they open the knife is that it's got lock stick, but it's simply because that oil got somewhere it wasn't supposed to be. So I actually think the wax probably works better, and it for sure is safer as far as not causing lock stick and stuff. So
travels better.
Yeah, for sure. So,
but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, the other thing that I would like to touch on it is that, building on what you said about the tinkering, there's also, you don't have to take it like you can if you want to, if you like to tinker, but you do not necessarily need to fully disassemble every single screw and component of a knife to do maintenance on it. All right.
Yes.
So, for example, most of the stuff doesn't really matter, but like for us, we've talked about before how our pivots are a really tight press fit. They basically have to either be pressed out with an arbor press or tapped out with like a hammer and a punch, right? So there is, unless you are changing the hardware, there is absolutely no reason to take a pivot out of the pivot hole. I'm talking about the pivot barrel, right? Not, obviously you got to take one of the screws off to disassemble it, but there is no reason to take both pivot screws off or to take the barrel out of the handle unless you are changing something out. There is nothing that you can't clean, nothing that you can't lubricate, nothing that you can't access with that pivot still in there. And just like I said with the blade, it's really kind of true even with your screws and everything, honestly, guys. But especially with something like with our really tight press pivots, and we're not the only ones that do that. So this applies to any knife that has that. If you take something like that and you press a pivot in and out of there multiple times, say you clean it once a week, and every time you clean it, you're pressing that pivot in and out, it's going to loosen up, guys. Like it's friction, it's metal against metal. Every time you do that, every time you take it in and out, you're basically causing wear on the materials, and it's going to loosen up. So your fit on your pivot, which we talked about before, is for a very important specific reason. It being fit tight like that, you're going to lose that, and then that's going to start to introduce play into your knife somewhere. So there is no reason to be taking that out unless you're changing the hardware. So that's
sorry, but when you mentioned that the first time on the podcast, I believe we had a comment or a question, what about if you're anodizing the knife? Well, that's not maintenance. That's tinkering. That's, that's aftermarket modification. That's not, necessarily something that's,
Yeah.
Sorry.
And if you're taking your knife apart every week, every other week, and re-anodizing a different color or whatever, all that, like the more times you take something apart, the more anything that has friction to it, then you're wearing stuff down. Honestly, even just like every time you take it apart, and I would say you're introducing at least some wear on the threads, the threaded holes, everything. You're taking a chance on snapping a screw, like whatever. Like it's just. I'm not a big fan of taking stuff apart just for the sake of taking it apart. I get that people want to see what they look like on the inside and all that, which is totally fine. And we build our knives with that in mind, that people are going to see the inside of them. But from a maintenance and a taking care of your knife standpoint, taking them apart is not that necessary. I would say, like I said, if you blow it out, keep a little lube on it, keep the edge stropped. I would say if you're using the same knife every day and you use it in a fairly tough environment, maybe once a month, fully disassemble it, clean it out, and re-lube everything, put it back together, and you're good to go. But again, you don't take out or remove anything that you don't have to. I wouldn't, because you're even just asking for, dropping a little dropping the stop pin or dropping the whatever, some of these little parts and losing it. Like it's
screws
just,
and
yeah. I mean, I don't take and just disassemble my guns and stuff with all the little tiny springs and parts in them just for the fun of it. Like if I have to for some reason, yeah, but I'm not just doing it for the fun of it, and because I know I'm going to end up scratching something, I'm going to end up dropping something, losing something, So,
yeah,
but
I would say especially for autos too. Don't go just jumping into taking apart an auto if you're, that is a last resort, even, for you or I,
yeah,
taking those things apart. You don't do it unless you have to, because they can be dangerous, like very dangerous, because you got to tension that spring back in, mainly speaking on like the way you build them. Like
right,
that's the one I've had the most experience putting together and stuff and cutting myself with, because you spring load a blade, and if you don't keep constant pressure on it, you got problems coming
yeah.
at you quick. So
Yeah, it can make you a little nervous. There's a way to do it and do it safely, but it takes a little practice, takes a little dexterity, kind of
mhm.
figuring out the right way to do it, which what to hold where, why sometimes you need 3 or 4 hands almost, it seems like, but it's
Yeah, yeah. Those are definitely the times where I feel like I need like need to become an octopus and need extra
yeah,
arms and stuff to hold stuff down. But
right.
as far as like, do you have any recommendations as far as like sharpeners, or like as far as products for the people? If not, I've got a few off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Or
no, I'll be honest with you. I don't, simply because like I like, just like I said, for the striping stuff. I mean, there's nice leather strops out there. I mean, I
Mhm.
usually just put some cheap ceramic rods. I picked up tons of them. I think I bought them at Smoky Mountain Knife Works years ago, back in their like knife makers section. I've got
Yeah,
quite a few of my life. It's just a little ceramic rod with a little wooden handle on it. Those work great for maintaining the edge. As for the sharpening, I'm so spoiled by having, if I need to sharpen something, I'm 99% of the time I'm actually taking it over there to the sharpening grinder and doing it. I mean, I'm not
yeah,
pulling out whetstones and stuff at the house. I'm bringing the stuff out here and doing it. So at this point, I'm a little spoiled and not really up to date on the newest
a little more
sharp.
mechanized.
That's right. So I'll leave those
Yeah,
recommendations up to you. I'm not
all
good
right.
on that.
Yeah, so for me, as far as a guided system, I would recommend the KME, all made in America. Very good, fixed angle sharpening system. It's what I use for a lot of my knives, because I'm not good at the whole mechanized process. That's the part where I like to slow down, and, I'm not screwing the knife up at this point. I would just like it to be sharpened, like it to be done. So I would rather not take off too quick, too much at the belt grinder, or do this or that. But so I recommend the KME for that. If you like to freehand, I use a couple things. I use King, I think it's King Home Waterstone. It's like a 1,000 and then 3,000 on. It's like a double sided stone. It's like a water stone, and that'll do. Even though it's a 1,000, it you can take off a good bit. You don't necessarily need it to be like a 220 grit to get like some super deep scratches out. Sometimes you do if you need like a. I know a lot of guys use diamond plates if there's really bad gouges in there. Again, for me, if I have those issues, I've got a belt grinder that I can kind of take out some of those big issues out and then go into the sharpening. So I don't necessarily have the diamond plates and stuff like that. The Nev diamond stones are really good. They're like a bonded, they're not like diamonds coated on a surface, like we're used to as far as, what you've seen forever, but they're actually like diamonds in a matrix. And so they're like a water stone, but they're diamonds in there. So it's like a synthetic sort of water stone almost. Those are good. For strops, JRE Industries has a really good, like, it's a 4-sided strop. It's got like black rouge, green rouge, pink rouge, and then like just a natural leather side. Or I think you can, get it set up with 4 black or 4 green or whatever else. They've also got like a really good little roll up strop that has like a little uh, like a bungee cord at the end. It's meant for like backpacking and stuff. You hook it on a tree limb and just,
Oh yeah,
strop out in the woods and stuff. So I like that. And I think the paddle strop is like $35 or $40, and the little roll up one is 10 or 15. So not bad at all. For oil for the action, I like nano oil. I like KPL. Like I've said, I've tried different greases and Teflon, grease stuff, and had good success with those. I think just about anything works. I've also just used mineral oil, and I've, done stuff like that too. So, pick your own adventure there. And then for corrosion resistance, mineral again works well there. Or if you're really worried about it, I would suggest getting some wax of some sort. I offer wax, Jonathan offers wax, but also Axe Wax and a bunch of those other guys, they do good stuff. And so, yeah. And also, if you're going to be taking stuff apart, get good drivers, like Weehaw sort of drivers and stuff. Not, well, I'm talking out both sides of my mouth right now, but I was going to say don't get the cheap things at the, auto parts store, but I am still currently using a cheap little driver set that I got at the auto parts store that I worked at in college. So,
that's not still not the ideal though. Like it's
yeah. I would
that
recommend a higher quality bit so you don't strip out screws and stuff like that, because that's never fun. And then you've got to figure out A, can you get the screw out, and B, can you get another screw to replace that, and that sort of thing. So quality drivers is a good thing. And I'm trying to think of what else. I think that's pretty much it as far as maintenance. Q-tips are your friend. Even, not taking apart, if you don't have compressed air, Q-tip will go a long way in getting a lot of stuff out of there. Just, quick swipe inside, swipe around the pivot, and, you can usually get into the stop pin locations pretty easy with those too. On some knives you can't if it's like an internal stop pin track, but most of the times those don't get as cluttered. Right. But yeah, so those are my sort of knife maintenance recommendations. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point on the Q-tips and stuff. That another thing, guys, which is not exactly knife maintenance. Well, one thing, the Q-tips reminded me, like we were talking about keeping the lock face clean. Acetone is the best thing that we have found to clean the lock face. I think it's better than even like rubbing alcohol or anything like that. So acetone is sometimes like if a lock face gets much oil on it, like sometimes we have to clean it. Like we'll clean it, let the acetone dry, and then like check it or whatever. And sometimes we have to repeat that process 3 or 4 times. Like you'd be surprised. As a matter of fact, sometimes we've repeated it. I think it's just because it's drawing more. The oil gets down into the pores of the knife, and sometimes it just takes, acetone evaporates very quickly. So I think it just takes a while to get enough acetone into the pores of the knife, as it evaporates and you put more on there. It's just keeping on removing more oil. So sometimes it takes, like, I mean, I've been to the point where I was ready to just give up on getting one to quit sticking, and I just kept doing the acetone, and then finally it quit sticking, and then it's just gone unless you get more oil on it. So that is usually like just a quick little swipe one time with acetone is not going to be a miracle cure. Sometimes it takes multiple times with ample, and don't be afraid to, like, we do like what we call acetone bombing. Like we literally take it and just like soak it down with acetone, and then repeat that several times sometimes if they really get a lot of oil soaked into them. So try to avoid oil on the lock face in the first place if you can. Wax is a good way to do that. If you do get it on there, then acetone, and plentiful acetone, is your friend with that. So the one other thing I would say is, guys, I think a whole lot of you way overestimate how much torque needs to be put on like little 256 screws. Guys, they do not have to be like when you're turning it, like say you're turning a driver with your fingertips and the screw bottoms out and stops turning. It takes just a nudge beyond that is all you need. Like it's not
a quarter turn. I wouldn't even say a 16th of a turn. It's just a bump, like,
Yes.
Yeah.
It does not. The best 256 screws out there are still 256 screws. They're still small. You will snap the heads off of them if you put much torque on them. That's just not. Those screws are small. That's not what they're made for. All right. Yeah. So it doesn't. They don't need it. Like, I mean, we put Loctite, blue Loctite on there. So if you're reassembling the knife, that's another thing. Know what your manufacturer uses or whatever. I think blue Loctite is kind of the best all around thing, and it doesn't take much. Like
no, it doesn't take much, and you've got to give it time to dry. You can't just immediately go back to, I mean, you can put it back in your pocket, but don't just sit there and, flick it and, then be surprised that the pivot got loose again. Like, you've got to let it, sit, and also make sure
until it dries.
Yeah. Also make sure those surfaces are clean and not filled with oil. Like you can't have a whole bunch of oil all over your screws and stuff like that, or inside your pivot barrel. And
right. And go very light with the Loctite, because it will ooze out. So like one thing I've always had to teach our guys is basically you take the pivot, we dip the threads in the pivot screw, you dip the threads in a little bit of Loctite, and then take a paper towel and kind of like roll the screw on the towel so that it removes. Basically, it only leaves Loctite kind of in the threads. It's not like cooped up, all like kind of dripping off of it. It's just kind of Loctite down in the grooves of the threads, and then you screw that in there, and that is plenty. And you screw that in there. That way it's not oozing up out of there, because, you don't want that stuff oozing out and getting around your pivot. Then you're right back to worse off than you were in the first place before you did your maintenance. So, yeah.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a good point on the Loctite. That was one thing I forgot. Definitely a good part of the kit. And on the fixed blades, I was going to mention one thing and admit that I'm bad at this, but technically you're not supposed to store them in the sheath if you're looking to maintain the quality of the knife. Especially Kydex can promote rust, and then with leather, especially if you've got like any sort of brass or nickel silver, if they're like sort of old school, have guards and stuff, that can cause tarnishing on those things inside the leather, and leather can trap moisture. So throwing it out there, not saying I'm practicing what I'm preaching, but just I know this. I don't necessarily follow my own advice though. So
yeah. So
I just don't know what you're supposed to do with them if they're not in the sheath. You can't just have
that's
sharp
when you
knives
have
everywhere.
a nice drawer with a nice toolbox or whatever with the drawers and everything laid out and all that. But yeah, it's kind of tough if you don't have if you're like me, you just got stuff thrown in a box or a drawer. It's kind of like
they're all over the place.
Laid out drawer, like a dresser drawer. Yeah, ideally that would be the thing to do. But so that actually, I think we covered maintenance pretty well, at least as far as our opinions of it. And then we do have some questions, but we're starting to run a little bit long, so maybe you want to pick one, maybe two questions that we can hit, and then we'll hold the rest of them for the next time.
Yeah, I think we can hit one and save the rest for next time. But it's one that I wanted to see what you said about it. Got an email from Erick Sane asking about. He said he had met you back in 2014 and had some of your customs, and he's just now getting back into the game and all that. But he was interested, and he had got some of your Hamons, your folders with Hamons back in the day, particularly an FMUC or two, maybe. I don't remember. But he asked if there was any chance of a small run of Mac 2s with Hamons at any point in the future, and, or if that would be too prohibitive outside of the process and stuff like that.
Right. It is prohibitive to do very many, for sure. That being said, it's not out of the question that we could potentially do like a small run. I don't know what that would look like, honestly. It could end up being that I do some and basically kind of, do them as customs, and, basically with the parts that we currently use, but then do the blade obviously out of different steel, probably 1095 or W2. And then basically kind of build them out as a custom with a hand ground blade and the Hamon and all that. Yeah. Or we could do it, kind of as part of the production, but a very, very limited run of it. I'm talking about like maybe, 5 knives or something like that, because it is very, it's a very
intensive.
Yeah, it's a very intensive process and
very hand laborious. There's not a lot of hands off things you can do with a Hamon. So
lots of hand work on it, and then it's also like there's no guarantees. I mean, you put the clay on there, you do it, whatever, and it does not, almost never comes out exactly the way you think it's going to, and sometimes it comes out, it just doesn't do the way you want it to. So
and
you're stuck redoing it or scrapping it, or so.
One thing I wanted to mention with that is, just so I've heard people not know this, so just so y'all know, you can't do Hamons with every steel. Only a certain number of steels do that. So
very few, actually.
So just letting y'all know. 1095, W2, 26C3, those sort of carbon steels are mainly the ones you're going to see that on.
The really high carbon steels, the simple steels, and you can get some like even like 01, you can get some like a
little bit. You can get more of a
it's closer to almost like a straight line than the wavy stuff you can get with some of the other ones. But yeah, it's not like we can't take Magna Cut and put a Hamon, not a true Hamon. Now we could do some sort of faux deal where that was just for looks, but it wouldn't be a true Hamon. So that very limited steels that you can do that with. So.
Yeah, so cool. I didn't expect that answer from you, so that was surprising to hear. I just know how intensive Hamons are, but like you said, it would have to be in a very limited capacity. It wouldn't be like a full production run. But
and realistically, probably I said like 5. Realistically, probably something like a one for an auction at Blade Show or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it'd probably be something like that, because doing a run of multiples would really start getting more intensive. But I hope to be able to do more of that kind of stuff as we get. We're still, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, I mean, we're still dialing in stuff as basic as because we change. When we change one thing, multiple things tend to change. So like we changed and brought the blade grinding in house, doing it completely different than it had been being done, and then that's made me rethink all our other processes, like I was talking about, the order of operations and everything. So if we can ever get kind of settled in on processes like that, and things are just kind of flowing a little better, then that will free me up to be able to do some more special project stuff like that. But right now we're just trying to keep the ship afloat by keeping the propeller spinning. So for now we can't tackle anything like that, but I do hope to get to that at some point. I hope to get to where things are running a little more smoothly and we're not constantly changing stuff. I mean, we're just constantly trying to improve, and not just improve as far as the quality, but like make it so that we can produce more knives more efficiently and stuff like that, rather than like we talked about with the grinding, not having to wait on people's lead times and stuff like that. Like just trying to streamline the overall process as a business. So
smoothing that whole little wave out.
Yeah, for sure. So hopefully down the road I'll have time to do a little more, some of the special projects like that once the normal processes are moving more smoothly. Right now those are kind of kicking my butt. So once that's figured out a little bit better, then hopefully. So cool.
So thank you, Eric, for the question. It was a good question. Appreciate you writing in. And for any of you other guys out there that have questions, we've got a couple more in the queue right now that we haven't got to. But if you have any questions for us or ideas for us, like WL Ray had for this episode, please email us. It's knifefreakshow@gmail.com. Usually I'm the one answering them, but if it's, sometimes I'll send them to Jonathan, make him answer them too. But
I'm going to try to start hopping on there and checking them a little bit more. I need to be able to be a little more in tune with that.
Yeah, and sometimes if I don't answer them, it's because I'm leaving them unread until we've answered the questions on the podcast, and then I'll get back to you. So I'm not ignoring you. I promise. I'm just trying not to forget you. But also wanted to mention that, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, Blade Show Atlanta is fast approaching, and we will both be there exhibiting. I will be at table 15B in the main room, and Jonathan will be at table 424 also in the main room. So we hope to see a lot of you guys there. If you're thinking about it, I couldn't recommend it enough to just give it a go. I mean, I know it's probably a lot of travel, a lot of expense, and this sort of stuff, but if you like knives, you need to go to Blade Show at the very least once in your life. And I'm not a huge fan of people and crowds and stuff, and I don't go to Atlanta otherwise beyond Blade Show. But, that I make exceptions for all those things because I wouldn't miss Blade Show. I can't. It's a magnificent time. So
it's just kind of the mecca almost for knife freaks. It's just not only are there tons of knives and stuff to see, but you get to be around all the other. That's the big thing. You get to be around other knife freaks and at a huge scale. So and meet people that you otherwise wouldn't get to meet, and it's crazy. Like even still to this day, like I still get it's crazy to just be walking through the crowd or walk in the bathroom and you're standing there, peeing next to a legend or something, in the industry or something like, it's like just,
I had that moment at Texas. Enrique Pena was beside me.
Well,
his cool hat and everything.
Enrique's a legend, all right.
Yeah.
I love Enrique.
Yeah,
we
he seems like
we have
such
a
a cool
good
dude.
time.
I've had the opportunity to try to talk to him a couple times, but I always like chicken out. But I'm
Oh
sure
yeah,
he's
I'll
awesome.
introduce you to. He's our Amy dubbed him the evil genius. So if you ever see him at a show, that's kind of what he looks like sitting
Oh
around.
yeah, he gives off those vibes.
Yeah, he's got
Yeah,
like evil genius vibes. So that's
yeah,
our yeah. He's a good dude and
yeah.
phenomenal maker and designer.
Oh
Like
yeah, yeah,
unbelievable. But anyway,
for sure.
but yeah, just people like people that you have seen, makers, owners of companies, whatever. Like you'll see just everybody. Like you get a chance to talk to them. You just rub elbows with everybody. It's super fun.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, looking
All
forward to
right.
hopefully meeting a lot of you guys there. Doing that whole thing. We'll have stickers for the show and all that, but we can save that for another time. I don't know why I'm
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
rambling.
No, we'll work on some. Yeah, I'm bumping some ideas around about some swag and stuff. So
Yeah,
we'll figure something out. Cool. All right, guys. Well, we sure do appreciate all the support. We really appreciate you guys listening and watching. I would encourage you that if you are listening to us on audio, check out the YouTube at some point and see. Sometimes, like today, we didn't really do like a lot of show and tell. Wasn't a lot to see on camera, other than our beautiful faces. But sometimes we are, we're able to show stuff on here that you aren't able to get on audio. So I'd
yeah,
encourage you to check us out on YouTube if you're listening on audio and see. But any support is great. We appreciate it. Please continue to listen and subscribe and leave us comments and reviews. We greatly appreciate it.
for sure. And don't forget to let your freak flag fly.